Today in the France 24 debate, are we really headed from bad to worse? And with us to talk about it, Majid Messaouden of the French Party of the Left, le Parti de Gauche. You chair the Front de Gauche, excuse me, and you chair the activist group Observers in Palestine.
Yeah.
Thank you for being with us. Marc Lefebvre, founder of Peace Now movement in Israel. Thank you for joining us. Thanks as well to Richard Wagman, president of the French Jewish Peace Union. And from London, political scientist Oren Kessler of the Henry Jackson Society. Welcome to the France 24 debate, where you can join the conversation on Facebook and Twitter. Right, let me bring in Oren Kessler at this point from London, where there was also a demonstration over the weekend. Let me ask you, Oren, seen from where you are, what's your view on the spillover effect that you're witnessing here in France?
Well, it's certainly very troubling. We had a large pro-Palestinian or anti-Israeli rally here in London just Saturday with about 15,000 people. Thankfully, it was largely nonviolent. There were a lot of rather unpleasant placards and some anti-Semitic remarks, etc. But as far as I know, nothing was set on fire. It's quite disturbing watching over here from across the English Channel at what's happening in Paris, the scenes of synagogues being firebombed and stones being thrown and people being locked in their synagogues. It's all extremely troubling.
What are your thoughts on it when you see it? What's your thoughts of the way things are evolving in France?
Well, you know, I was based in Israel for the past 8 years as a journalist, and I've been reading news items indicating that in the first few months of this year, more French Jews immigrated to Israel than at any time since Israel was founded, and that just during these 2 weeks of the Gaza operation, several hundred have emigrated, and I can certainly understand why. It seems like a rather toxic atmosphere at the moment for French Jews, and I do hope that improves.
Let's take this beyond France now and just try to look at the scale now of Western Europe. We see how the tension has risen here in France. Largely artificial for now, you're saying, Richard
Yes.
Wagman. But of course, all that could change. Oren Kessler, that broaches the broader question, which is there's the ground operation, and we can talk about it if you want later on, but there's the public relations war. Is Israel losing that public relations war right now?
Hamas has certainly waged a very successful public relations war. It knows that every Palestinian who's killed serves its propaganda purposes. It has very little to no regard for its own civilians' lives. That's why it uses them as human shields. That's why it builds bunkers and tunnels for itself, for its members, for its leaders, but not for civilians. That's why it tells Gazan civilians to stay in buildings that the IDF has warned it will bomb to target terror, infrastructure, missiles, etc. So really, Hamas has placed. Hamas essentially wins either way. If it kills Israelis, it wins because then Gazans are happy with it. If Gazans die, then Hamas wins international sympathy for Gaza and indeed for itself. So it's waged a very cynical and yet a very effective PR campaign.
Earlier, our correspondent in Gaza told us, Gallagher Fenwick, that Palestinian officials there were saying that they want a ceasefire with honor and that they won't accept just simply a truce. They want more. So at this point, Oren Kessler, can you have a truce?
Well, the two sides, Israel and Hamas, want very different things. Essentially, Israel is in sort of an alliance with Egypt and with much of the international community on the matter of a ceasefire. Egypt brokered a ceasefire last week that Hamas rejected. Hamas is now sort of in consultation with Qatar, which is drafting a ceasefire that's much more amenable to Hamas. But the terms that Hamas and that Qatar are after are essentially non-starters from Israel's perspective. Essentially, they want complete access by land and by sea to Gaza. They want the release of most or all of the prisoners who Israel has recently rearrested. And Israel sees this as an unacceptable risk to its security to allow the free movement of goods and people into Gaza. So the question is whether the two sides can sort of meet somewhere in the middle, and it's not quite clear at the moment.
It's not quite clear, but we had an Egyptian diplomat quoted as saying this Monday that they were amenable to amendments to accommodate Hamas. What did they mean?
You would have to ask that Egyptian official, but I would speculate that there could be some kind of some sort of moves that would allow a bit more flexibility at the Rafah crossing, for example, between the Gaza Strip and Egypt. But I wouldn't suspect that there would be a significant, massive opening of the crossing simply because Egypt doesn't want that. Egypt is now run by a military-led government. They see Hamas as the enemy because Hamas is, of course, essentially the Palestinian branch of the Muslim Brotherhood. There's chaos in Sinai, and the Egyptian government simply doesn't want that. So there could be some sort of arrangement whereby Rafah is opened a little bit more, perhaps even with the presence of the Palestinian Authority from Ramallah. Whether Hamas would agree to that, again, it's unclear.
Oren Kessler, do you agree that basically the Israelis are their own worst enemy by now helping Hamas, which was weakened and isolated, to regain a lot of its clout?
I don't think it's surprising that the Israeli government refused to deal with an organization that remains avowedly publicly committed to its destruction. I don't know any country that would. There are certain conditions that the quartet of international peace negotiators, namely the EU, the UN, the US, and Russia, have laid on the table that have been there for years. That Hamas would have to accept previous Israeli agreements, renounce violence, accept Israel's right to exist, which Hamas hasn't done. These are very basic diplomatic conditions that essentially any country would I would imagine would agree to. So it's not particularly surprising to me that the Netanyahu government refused to do so.
All right, before flying off to Cairo, where he's going to try to help broker that truce, the U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry did the rounds of Sunday morning political talk shows. On Fox, the cameras kept rolling during the break when John Kerry was speaking on the phone with an aide.
It's a hell of a pinpoint operation. It's a hell of a pinpoint operation.
Right. It's escalating significantly, and it just underscores the need for ceasefire.
We've got to get over there.
Yep.
Thank you, John. I think, John, we ought to go tonight. I think it's crazy to be sitting around.
All right, then the presenter tells him, well, we're taping you the whole time. I don't know about we can discuss the ethics of that, but in any case, let me ask you, Oren Kessler, do you wish that diplomats would speak a little more bluntly in public than they do in private?
It was certainly a rather strange sight to see John Kerry saying what he just said, what you just showed, and then once the interview got started, he backtracked completely and said, well, we fully support Israel's right to defend itself, etc. Now, John Kerry is a very seasoned diplomat, and one would think that he was aware that he was being filmed and that the conversation was indeed on speakerphone. So perhaps this was a deliberate, his own deliberate way of getting a message to the Israeli government without sort of straying from the administration's line. Either that, or it was just a massive sort of flub or faux pas, as you say in Paris. But it certainly gives a window into what John Kerry is thinking, I would imagine.